Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
We are beginning the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers. We're going to see in a moment why it's called the book of Numbers. But we're not going to stay with the census business for very long. We're going to go somewhere else because that's what's happening these days. I'm going somewhere else entirely. All right, let's say a bracha for Torah study as well as for beginning a new book of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, God, Spirit of the universe, who makes us holy with your mitzvot and commands us to engage with words of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'echeyanu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. We bless the source of life for giving us life and sustaining us in that life that we could reach together the time of beginning a new book of Torah. All right, so with no further ado, or because Bert's here, adieu, we will go to look at our text. Okay, so we're beginning the book of Bamidbar. We are coming to the book after the Levitical text has been inserted between Exodus and Numbers. So this continues actually the narrative from Exodus. Then the priestly material, the Leviticus gets put in and bumps the continuation of the Exodus narrative to the beginning of Numbers. So we are, and then of course we're going to have the addition of the book of Deuteronomy, the fifth book. Originally it was a collection of 4 books. So we're going to get Deuteronomy next. All right, so let's see how Bamidbar starts. It's always important to the rabbis how these things start. They're very interested in what psukim of Torah starts, particularly a book, but both a parsha and a book, but especially a book. All right, so how does this book begin? Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe Bamidbar Sinai be'ohel moed be'achad lechodesh hasheni b'shana hashenit latzetam me'eretz Mitzrayim lemor. So God speaks to Moses, Bamidbar Sinai. We're told it's in the wilderness of Sinai, in the tent of meeting, on the first day of the second month of the second year of their having gone out from the land of Egypt. That's all parenthetical saying, right? So we could have ended after Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. God spoke to Moshe saying, but we get this parenthetical in Midbar Sinai from the Ohel Moed on the first day of the second month in the second year of having gone out from Eretz Mitzrayim. Okay, so what does God say? God says, Se'u et rosh kol adat b'nei Yisrael mishpachotam lebeit avotam b'mispar shemot kol zachar l'gulgolotam. Se'u et rosh, lift up the head of all of the people Israel, the entire community, the Edah, the community of Israel, Lemishpachotam, by their families, meaning their clans. Leveit Abotam, the house of their ancestors, according to the number of names, each male, Gulgulotam. So literally, and I think this is a really excellent translation, per capita, because it's about, Gilgul is a circle. So it's talking about head, right? You're a person's head. So numbering, that's why it's called the book of Numbers, because you're going to number all the males, because you are now creating a camp structure, both for breaking camp, setting up camp, and marching. So you are in a wilderness where your population is vulnerable. And so this is actually war formation. This is military formation. So you need to know how many men of fighting age you have. Who is that going to be? Mi bein 20 shana v'mala, those who are 20 years old and older. Kol yotzei tzava b'Yisrael, everyone who goes out in the armed forces in Israel. Tifkedu otam, you shall count them. This is another word for counting. Letzivotam atav Aharon, for their battle stations, you and Aharon. So we've had 2 terms for counting. Se'u et rosh, lift up the head of every person of the community, and tifkedu otam, from this shoresh pei kuf dalid pakad. So two terms for counting. We'll get to that in a second. Ve'itchem yiyu ish lamateh ish rosh levet avotav hu. So there should be a person for each tribe, each head of the ancestral house. And then we get a list of the names of the leaders from each of the tribes. Okay. So it's funny because when I was preparing, I'm like, how far am I going to go with them in the text before I go back to the sentence we're actually going to focus on? And it's like, I went, skip all this, right? So what's funny is, why are we skipping it? Because it's like, who cares, right? Like all these names that, who cares? And it's like, so why is it even listed here? Like, and it's like, Amy, it's listed because that's why the language for counting is tifkedu, give them a role. It's not just count them just as know the number. Each person counts. Each person literally counts. So pakad is about is a tafkid, is a role, a job, a part to play in the grand scheme of things. It's not just how many bodies you have. Se'u et rosh kol adat b'nai Israel. If you're going to count them, it's talked about as lifting up the head. It's about dignity. It's about respect. It's about respecting each individual, even as you're looking at ancestral clans and houses and tribes. And then here I am ready to skip over all the names of the individual, right? So, Torah is telling us just by listing, I think, the individuals that they're not kidding. Like it really is about treating everybody as important and everybody as unique, and everybody is having an important role in the whole business. And so that is how we understand counting biblically, and how the rabbis understand it whenever God commands counting, that it is an act of love and it is an act of dignity. And so, we get this list of those who are called. We have a ktiv here, probably a scribal error at some point. So it's written, but we read it differently than what's written because it doesn't make any sense how it's written. So we read it this way because that makes more sense. And you can see where's the discrepancy, the vav and the yud. So you can see how over time, if this vav gets short enough, it looks like a yud. That's how scribal errors happen. A scribe makes this vav shorter, and all it takes is one scribe in copying the text to understand it as a yud instead of a vav, and now that becomes the scribal tradition. Okay? So, that one's easy. Some are not as easy. That one's a really easy one to see how a vav could easily become a yud as things get copied and the vav gets shorter and shorter by mistake and gets mistaken as a yud. All right. So now they're trying to figure out, right, how many they have. Vayif kedem. Again, we get this word, right, that they are counted for battle. So far, anything anybody want to say? I know y'all have strong feelings about everything. So anything anybody want to say? Okay. So we've talked lots of times about the difference, how Torah sees counting versus a dehumanizing kind of counting, which we have a long history with. Most recently, of course, the Shoah. Those of us who knew people with tattoos on their arms, who, they were just a number. And so Torah is very, very careful, even thousands of years ago, to use language about counting that is the opposite of dehumanizing and the opposite of reducing people to a number. And so for me, that's one of the important things about just even the language of the book of Numbers. Yes, Bert.
So just the men are counted.
Because this is about
that.
This
and
is
then
about,
the other thing I was going to say is when you talked about a circle for a face, I also think as a family as sitting in a circle.
Beautiful. So the circle of each person, and then the circle of circles that makes up a family unit. Beautiful. And yes, this is only men because this is men of 20 years old, because this is going to be your fighting force. They are mustering. This is actually a muster, right? This is Moshe and Aaron mustering the troops, literally. So everyone who has to report for duty, essentially. And then we're going to get who's exempted, right, from service. Remember all that stuff about anyone who's gotten married and hasn't yet lived with their spouse, anyone who is scared. So anyway, okay. We're going to go back now and look a little more closely at one pasuk, the first pasuk, which you wouldn't think there's a lot there to unpack, would you? But we're going to spend the next 45 minutes on this. All right. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe, And God speaks to Moshe. And now we get the parenthetical in the wilderness of Sinai from the tent of meeting on the first day of the second month in the second year from their going out from the land of Egypt. Okay, so the commentators have a lot to say about this pasuk. Why? What is their issue? One set of commentaries has to do with this idea of Chodesh Hasheni and Shana Hashenit. So this idea of the second month and the second year. So they play with this idea of Shana and Shenit and Shinui, change. That this language is indicating something has changed. There's been a shift. And that's why we're getting all this business about Sheni, Shana, Shenit, because there's been a Shinui. There's been a change. And so there's a new revelation from God at this new phase of the people's experience, right? So they're in a new phase. So they're getting a new set of instruction. And Moshe is being given those instructions and is to carry them out with Aharon. But a lot of the commentary that I read this year that grabbed me was relating this idea of Midbar Sinai, the wilderness of Sinai, that this is significant for the rabbinic commentary, that this new address from God after all the Leviticus material, this new address to God to muster the troops, this is happening in Midbar Sinai. So what else happened at Sinai? When else did God talk at Sinai? Not yet. I mean, we haven't gotten, we're about to come to Shavuot. So we're about to come to the big talking at Sinai, right? We're about to come to Revelation. For the rabbis, they can't ignore that. They can't ignore that this parsha is read right before Shavuot in most years, unless you have a leap year. So what is they can't ignore. It's just too rich an invitation to see Midbar Sinai, this addressing the people in Midbar Sinai, the wilderness of Sinai, and what's coming for Shavuot, which is Matan Torah at Har Sinai, right? The giving of Torah at Har Sinai, at the mountain of Sinai. But we also have another reference in our tradition to this moment of revelation, and that's the one between God and Moshe, right? The commissioning of Moshe in the rabbinic imagination happens at Har Sinai. He just doesn't know that that's the significance of this spot, is that it's going to be where revelation occurs. And the wilderness of Sinai is where this address from God occurs, that it bumps right up against, as we read it, the holiday of Shavuot that happens at Har Sinai. Okay? So Midbar Sinai, the wilderness of Sinai, and Har Sinai, revelation at the mountain of Sinai. For the rabbis, these have to be related. This cannot be an accident. This is a cosmic occurrence that these things are close together. Because we're not going to read this text at Shavuot. What do we read at Shavuot? We read the giving of Torah at Shavuot, right? We read what happens at Har Sinai on Sunday and Monday, okay? So the fact that we read this stuff about Midbar Sinai, the Sinai wilderness, for them must connect somehow to God's giving of Torah at Har Sinai. Okay, so let's say we buy that, because if Torah is revelation for all time, let's say they're right. There has to be a connection. What is the connection? And that's what we're going to spend our time looking at. How do they make a connection? What's the connection for them? And it's actually some pretty beautiful teaching that spoke to me this year, given where a lot of us are. All right. So here's our pasuk, Numbers 1:1. So Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kutsk, the Kutzker Rebbe, says, only when you are like a wilderness, kamidbar. So we get midbar here, right? God speaks to Moshe Bamidbar Sinai, in the wilderness of Sinai. Only when you are like a wilderness are you ready to have God's presence rest upon you and merit the light of Torah. So for the Kutzker Rebbe, what's the connection? We have to be like Midbar Sinai. We have to be like the Sinai wilderness before we can stand at Har Sinai for Matan Torah. So we have to be like the Sinai wilderness in order to merit Har Sinai, the revelation at Mount Sinai. What does that mean, like a wilderness? It means that you have not yet been touched by human hands, that you have never been cultivated or planted. That's how he's defining wilderness, that you must rely on your own strength, as in the teaching, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? All right. So this is one, I tried to organize this in a way so we can work through the idea. It's not necessarily working through the commentators according to time and when they lived, because this is a later commentary. But it gives you an idea of the kinds of things. That's how they make this connection. The connection is between Sinai as wilderness and Har Sinai as revelation. What is the connection for the Kutzker Rebbe and Hasidic teaching? It's that we have to be like the Midbar, which is opposed to the civilization that they built in Israel, which was about tending crops. So you're not supposed to be like that, like tending crop kind of territory and land. You're supposed to be like a wilderness if you want to be able to receive Torah. What does that mean? That means it's never been cultivated or planted. It's on its own. It relies on its own strength. And they look to Mishnah Avot for this quote, Im ein ani li mi li. If I am not there for me, who will be for me? So we have to be ready to do this on our own and do it with our own strength. Of course, we need teachers. Ultimately, we need students. But we have to be like the Midbar Sinai and rely on ourselves and our own we could fill in our own words, our own curiosity, our own passion. For us these days, our own commitment. It takes a commitment for y'all to show up on Friday mornings at 10 o'clock. There's lots of other things pulling at y'all to do. Okay, so that you can fill it in with whatever, and we'll talk about it when you're ready to talk about it. Make a note somewhere to yourself if you want to add some words here to what does it mean to be like a midbar in terms of meriting Matan Torah, the revelation of Torah. Okay. When we look at Rashi, we get this interesting reference to kamidbar, like a midbar, like a wilderness, but it's from Nidarim. It's actually from Talmud, and Rashi there says kamidbar, like a midbar, shehu mufkar lakol, playing on the shoresh that we're going to look at in a minute. This teaches that Torah is freely available to all. Milamed Torah b'chinam lakol. So what does it mean to be like a wilderness? For Rashi, it means that it's deserted, it's open, it's free, it's ownerless. And why is that important for Matan Torah, for revelation? What does that have to do with Torah being like a wilderness? Because it teaches that Torah b'chinam lakol is free for everyone. It's available to everyone. It is ownerless. And we're going to look at ownerless and what that means in a minute. But in Iturei Torah, Rabbi Dr. Shocham writes, another reason that the Torah portion of Bamidbar is always read right before Shavuot, the time of giving of Torah, is to teach you that if you want to merit receiving Torah, you must make yourself like the wilderness, to have a great measure of humility and to feel no reason for pride, to know that you are bare and lacking all, like the wilderness. So not only is Torah free of ownership, don't think you own it. Don't think your Torah learning is so hot and you're such a big shot because you have a lot of it. You should remain humble like the Midbar, that is uncultivated, right? That is ownerless, if you will, so that you're not going to feel pride and arrogance in how much Torah you think you know. All right. In the commentary to Numbers, an early commentary, Numbers Rabbah, God spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai. Why was Torah given in the wilderness of Sinai? Like, why was Torah given at Har Sinai? Like, why in the Midbar? Why wasn't it given in the land of Israel? From this, our sages taught, Torah was given to the accompaniment of three things: fire, water, and Midbar, wilderness. Why was the giving of Torah marked by these three features? To indicate as that these are free to all in the world, so also are the words of the Torah free. Anyone who does not make herself as open, hefker, ownerless as the wilderness is not able to acquire wisdom and Torah. So that's going back to Rashi. So you see where Rashi says mufkar, it's this word hefker. And now we're going to look at this because I find this fascinating, that the rabbis go to hefker as the concept they're going to use to tie midbar to meriting revelation. Before we go there, Betsy, is there something you want to add?
I was just wondering if that we're like the wilderness could be referring to us as a blank slate, and we have no other gods or belief systems, or we're not following any other religion or worshiping idols, so that would make us like a wilderness. We're like I said, a blank slate and open.
There are commentators who go exactly to that place of it's unsettled, right? The Midbar is by definition unsettled. What does that mean? It means ownerless. It means a blank slate. It means, and so for us, what might that mean? Because none of us comes to the study of Torah as a blank slate.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean? Like, how can that be useful for us, right? And we're going to look at more commentary on it. But for me, it's about, okay, how do I come to the study of Torah without my already in place Western, modern, contemporary, critical, right, defensiveness, like ready to argue with Torah because it was written 4,000 years ago by men, right? So like that's one. For me, that's kind of what some of this is pointing to. For me personally, is that we already have our lens through which we see something. We have ethnocentricity. We have the times we're looking through, and can we open ourselves and be blanker slates in order to just receive what we can receive from Torah that's looking to get in without us needing to bring all of our preconceived stuff to it. I mean, that's one of the things that said to me this time, but we're going to see where the rabbis go. That speaks even more to this time that some of us are living in, this time of devastation, this time of everything being gone. And the rabbis go there too, which I just think is fantastic. How do they get there? All right, so we just went to Rashi, who says, mufkar, it is hefker. What is hefker? Well, do y'all remember how excited I was about Hashivat Avedah, returning lost property? Do you remember? I gave a whole Torah teaching about it, then I gave a high holiday sermon about it, and I was so excited about it. Here it is again, people. I couldn't believe it. Here it is again. What does this have to do with Hashivat Avedah, the obligation to return lost objects? Because when something is declared hefker, that is when it is ownerless and you can take it. Meaning you don't have to return it to its owner if it has all right. So you don't have to return lost property to someone if the property has become hefker, ownerless. So ownerless property and renunciation of ownership. So if I find this pen on the ground and there's very little reason to believe that I'm going to be able to identify the owner by anything on the pen is hefker. It's assumed that the owner has given up ownership of it because the owner knows there's no way for the person who picks it up to find them and identify them. So the pen becomes technically hefker, ownerless. And therefore, I'm not obligated to find the owner of the pen. So that's the halachic definition of hefker. But you can also say, I am giving this pen to charity, and the minute I do that, it becomes hefker. So I have renounced ownership of the pen in giving it to KI to put in the supply closet. So it can either be hefker by assumption because there's no way to identify the owner, or because the owner has renounced ownership. But our commentator here gives us another category, and that is property that's never been owned before, such as wild animals and birds, fish of the river and ocean, and wild or forest plants. So in other words, if I'm going through the woods and I find berries, I'm allowed to take them because they're hefker. They've never had an owner. If I'm fishing in the river, it's hefker, because the fish are not owned. So there's property that has ceased to belong to its former owner and property that's never been owned before. Okay? So then if we're looking at hefker, and Rashi's the one who brings this idea up, if we're looking at hefker as a concept, then how does that help us understand to be kamidbar, like the midbar? Reb Bachya, now we're going back to an early commentary. Reb Bachya asks, restating an earlier midrashic teaching, why does the Torah emphasize God's speech to Moshe Bamidbar Sinai, in the wilderness of Sinai? It was to teach that, quote, a person does not attain the Torah until they have made themselves empty and abandoned like the wilderness. So here we get, again, Ein Adam koneh HaTorah, a person can't get Torah, ad sheyaseh atzmo hefker, until a person makes themselves hefker kamidbar. Hefker, ownerless, free, open, kamidbar, as the midbar. Okay, so now we've got a midrashic term, hefker kamidbar, this technical state of being hefker, which is a state that property is in, so that it is available. And now the midrash says a person has to make themselves hefker kamidbar, open, ownerless, like the midbar, if one is to acquire Torah. So now we see the development of a whole new category, which I don't think I've ever known before. Hefker kamidbar, open like the wilderness. Beautiful. Available, like the wilderness is available. Like stuff in the wilderness is available. It's technically hefker. That's what we have to make ourselves. We have to make ourselves available, is how I'm reading this and why I think it's such a beautiful teaching. Okay, so I see two hands. Let me just finish this paragraph. Just as divine revelation and the Torah arise from the physical space of wilderness, of Midbar, at the burning bush, and then at Mount Sinai, a heart infused with divine Torah arises through a person's mindful cultivation of their own interior wilderness. One should seek to attain the level of hefker, of feeling unbound by the pride and egoism of ownership, of being unattached to materialism. All I could think about was everything material I owned burned down. In hefker consciousness, we train our spiritual sight to see the divine presence that dwells beneath the surface, beneath the many golden calves of our obsessions, possessions, and wayward priorities. This is a radical reinvention of the concept of hefker, a neutral halachic category of abandonment and ownerlessness. In this transformed reading, the midbar may be said to embody a pure state of emptiness, an inner cleansing that allows us to go deeper into the spiritual path. Becoming hefker kamidbar is a process of letting go of our imprisonment in materiality, in ephemeral and finite desires, to be liberated into the vastness of an inner wilderness. What? Wait a minute. You mean freed from all the stuff, maybe, that we are so engaged with all the time, that I spent a lifetime collecting, that I've treasured, right? I'm just saying. All right, Rachel, and then Mehmet.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. And when each part of it that you read, all I could think, through so much of it, I kept thinking that it's like trying to bring yourself back to a state of Eden-like innocence. I kept thinking Eden. And it was, especially in that last piece that you read, that's where I kept going. And so I actually don't love the word empty. And it's because when I hike in the woods a lot. Where I live, there's lots of wilderness, different kind of wilderness, but lots of wilderness isn't empty. It's teeming with life. But that life it's in this state of, it's ownerless. It all goes about its business. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't rely on us at all. It just goes about its business. It does, and it's a state of perfect innocence. It's like in order to attain some spiritual growth, you have to a state of.
Yes. So friendly amendment.
Yeah.
The thing that I resonate with about emptiness is in order to apprehend all of that life around you, you must empty yourself of all the chatter up here, the to-do list, the regrets, the I screwed up, the I should have said this and I said that, the I forgot to call so-and-so. That's what we have to empty ourselves of in order to apprehend the fullness of the midbar around us.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
And we're going to see a piece that I'll show you that got me there.
Yeah. No. 100%.
About the Dakota Plains. So you'll see it in a second. Mehmet?
I think Torah, without us owning it, is also hefker. Because God doesn't need Torah. Torah is a link, is a contract between us and God, and it serves as in that purpose. If we don't own it, if we hadn't owned it as the Israelite people, as Jews, Torah would always be there hefker, without any owners. It's up to us to make Torah what it is today. I don't think it's only us who are hefker, but also Torah is. It doesn't mean anything without us and without God. We have to own it together.
Beautiful, beautiful. And this is part of what Rashi says that the later tradition picks up on and says it doesn't, meaning it wasn't given in the land of Israel because it doesn't belong to y'all. Torah is for everybody who wants to learn Torah, right? That's dafka why it was given in the wilderness. That's why it's hefker, because it doesn't belong to y'all, the Jewish people. Yes, you need to, if you want to receive Torah, you need to make yourselves hefker, but Torah itself is hefker, like you just said. And therefore, don't get all, possessive, thinking you're the only ones who get to learn Torah. Anyone who wants to learn Torah can learn Torah, which I think is a beautiful thing for the masters of a tradition to say, is that it doesn't belong to us. Bert, you're still muted.
I don't resonate so much with the emptiness as I do with the issue of ownership. The issue is to whether we are the sole owners of ourselves and therefore are isolated from anything else. And if one translates Torah as godliness, then the opportunity, the choice to be owned by that is very different from being just owned by ourselves and our desires and what we happen to want. And I know ownership indicates control, but one can agree to be controlled or guided, if you want, by Torah and godliness. If the end of life, if the goal of life is to bring godliness into this world, then to be owned by Torah, as it were, becomes a goal, as opposed to just being owned by ourselves and whatever we happen to want at them.
So thank you. And I'll reiterate that means we must be free of and empty of some things, like our obsession with more and our obsession with status and our obsession with control. We have to be free and empty of that in order to be hefker enough to be available to be what Doniel Hartman called what you said just now. Doniel Hartman talks about that in terms of voluntarily being encumbered by each other and by the tradition, right? That Jews are encumbered. Once we say we belong to the Jewish people, we are encumbered by other Jews.
It's taking on an obligation.
That's right. We're taking on a responsibility.
And we have free will to do that or not.
That's right.
So the Torah.
So that's what I heard you saying, is that we are voluntarily becoming encumbered by the tradition that demands that we bring godliness into the world, and it means we're encumbered by other human beings with whom we're in relation. Margot, and then we're going to go on to more commentary.
So Bert, that's where my mind went to, and I love what you said. I really felt like it is about the cultivation that we decide is right for us using our free will, right? So if that includes whatever that includes, right? However Torah influences our life or how we remain connected to the Jewish people, etc. But I think as I was thinking about that back through what Rachel commented, sometimes nature takes care of itself and a fire, takes out overgrown brush in wherever it is. That is not, I know that's so sensitive, but I meant in a more ancient way, not in actual literal Palestine. But what I mean is so, once that's where are we reprogramming in our space? If I live on a plot or in a village or whatever it is, what am I doing with that space, right? To make it livable and beautiful and nourishing those around me. So
right.
I don't say.
Thank you. So let's look at some more on this business. As the early Hasidic Rebbe Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk taught, true wisdom and humanity rises from the cultivation of deep humility. The Torah only stands firm in one who makes herself like a midbar hefker, before those who are poor of mind and rich of mind, and he doesn't think of himself as better than her friend. On the contrary, they should be completely nullified before their friend, and it is through this that they become united and bound up with the other. True spiritual refinement, the deepest attainment of hefker kamidbar, must not remain at the level of individualistic mystical growth and the personal quest for divine revelation. To realize the ideals of piety, to ensconce the living Torah in the wholeness of oneself, a person must aspire toward a genuine humility, to avoid the harmful path of judgmentalism and arrogance. It is in the bond of loving friendship and fellowship, in kindness and humility toward the other, that the Torah and God are most radiantly revealed. All right, so Hefker Kamidbar means that we have to be truly humble, and that we don't, when we approach someone else, whether they're smarter than us or less knowledgeable than us, it doesn't matter, that we just show up, completely bare in front of the other person. And that's when Torah is most radiant. I think that's an important teaching for a lot of us. But I want to go back to this idea that Rachel mentioned. This is from Kathleen Norris, from a work called Dakota, A Spiritual Geography. Here, on the Great Plains of Dakota, the eye learns to appreciate slight variations, the possibilities inherent in emptiness. It sees that the emptiness is full of small things. A person is forced inward by the spareness of what is outward and visible in all this land and sky. Maybe seeing the plains is like seeing an icon, or we might say, Torah. What seems stern and almost empty is merely open, a door into some simple and holy. Exactly what Rachel was saying, that nature is not dafka empty, which is what Kathleen Norris is saying. She's teaching from what is spiritual geography. And I found the same to be true in Minnesota when it was all frozen and I would take my dogs to run by the lake and it was all white. It was white and blue, like white frozen lake and frozen beach and frozen, snowy everything and blue sky. And there's a spareness to that visually, which then opens you to see different formations in the ice as it moves and freezes at the edge of the lake, different cloud formations as they appear in the sky. The position of the sun in relationship to those clouds. So exactly what I won't say anymore, but I know it's obvious, but that's exactly what Rachel was saying. And I think this is exactly the kind of Hefker Kamidbar concept that the rabbis are touching on. All right, Brene Brown, in her work called Braving the Wilderness, the quest for true belonging and the courage to stand alone. You are only free when you realize you belong no place. This is very much my experience right now, by the way. You belong every place, no place at all. The price is high. The reward is great. True belonging is the spiritual practice of believing in and belonging to yourself so deeply that you can share your most authentic self with the world and find sacredness in both being a part of something and standing alone in the wilderness. True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. Really important teaching for me right now about this idea of I'm missing my place and feeling like I don't belong anywhere. This is not my house. This is not my town. This is not my book collection. So feeling very displaced and very disoriented and trying to be open to this message of this week that all these commentaries are pointing to and that Brene Brown is pointing to, as well as Kathleen Norris, that's a high price to pay. But if we can stay present to belonging no place, by belonging every place, how do we achieve that? By belonging fully to ourselves, authentically. We can do that. We belong everywhere because we belong nowhere. Okay, so I want us to stay open to that as we move on to Jonathan Sachs. Yes, Judith.
I'm sorry, I can't find the raise hand button on my iPad.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just thinking of the mix of the going within to abandon all of the attachments that we have, to see ourselves and be ourselves purely and openly, as well as the attachment to the outside world and the obligation we have. It's an inner and an outer wilderness that we have to permit to enter our lives. The New England poets wrote about walking in the woods and the forest, and I have found in this time of total loss of the life as I knew it, standing outside and looking at the clouds and realizing that I'm the same person in a different life.
Right. So I think, yes, that's what Brene Brown, right, is trying to communicate here. Beautiful. All right.
Yeah.
By Jonathan Sachs. We're going to connect these ideas to something Sachs writes in his commentary on Bamidbar. The commentary is here. This is a hyperlink to the commentary. It's a beautiful commentary if you want to read the whole thing. Wilderness and Revelation is the piece. He quotes Egyptian French poet Edmond Jabet, who notes the connection between davar, word, and midbar, wilderness. So midbar is davar with a mem stuck on the front of it, right? So it's the same three letters of word, meaning revelation. You should all think, as soon as you see word, you should think revelation when you're talking about a Jewish commentator. And midbar, wilderness. All right. So what's the connection for Edmond Jabet? For him, the wilderness experience is an essential and continuing feature of what it is to be a Jew. This is from Jabet. With exemplary regularity, the Jew chooses to set out for the desert, to go toward a renewed world that has become his origin. A wandering word is the word of God. It has for its echo the word of a wandering people. No oasis for it, no shadow, no peace. Only the immense, thirsty desert, only the book of this thirst. Meaning, people of the book. What book? The thirsty book. So in all the resonances of that word, right? So how hard it is to be thirsty, and without thirsting for spiritual, whatever, we don't achieve any kind of spiritual growth. All right. So this is still Sachs writing about what Jabet just said. But there is a further immensely significant dimension to the fact that the Torah was given in the wilderness. Israel alone among the nations of world history received its constitution even before it had entered its land. There is no analogy to this anywhere else. For every other nation, the land long preceded the laws. And it did for Israel too, let's be clear. But no other country has a story about its origins that says we got the Constitution before we got the land. So you don't have to take it literally to appreciate what Sachs is saying, because I think it's true. I would say it differently because I don't believe literally that's what happened, that God gave the Constitution in the wilderness and then there was the land of Israel through a conquest. We know that's not how it happened, that Israelites descended from Canaanites. And I just read an article in the Biblical Archaeology that has proven it through DNA, that both modern Arab populations and modern Jewish populations both have shared DNA with Canaanite DNA that they have resurrected from finds in ancient Canaan. All right, so we know that it emerges in Canaan, but still our story is that we got our instructions in the Midbar. So what is the poignance of that? For every other nation, the land long preceded the laws. A people live in a certain territory. Gradually, they begin to associate in ever larger groupings. They fight wars, build settlements, adopt leaders, develop a political structure, and then create a body of legislation to regulate their affairs. Nations develop organically like plants, with their roots in a soil, a landscape. In the history of Israel and nowhere else, the nation received its laws in the wilderness, before it had even seen, let alone settled the land. This is one of the great paradoxes of Judaism. It is no accident that the Israelites received their greatest revelation, the moment that forged them into a nation outside the land, Bamidbar, in the wilderness, the place that is not a place. Just as Jacob received his two revelations, the one on the ladder and the wrestling, in the midst of journeys, in places that were between, neither starting point nor destination. The giving of the Torah in the wilderness is an essential feature of Jewish history. Had the Israelites received the Torah in the land, it would be indissolubly associated with the land. Exile would mean the end of the covenant. It would make no more sense to keep Torah while in exile than to obey the laws of Russia while living in Spain. What made the God of Israel different was the fact that God was sovereign of the universe, not a local deity. That is why the Jewish people survived dispersion. Only the God of everywhere can be found and worshipped anywhere. Or, as Brene Brown says, only someone who belongs nowhere can belong everywhere. So I think what Sachs is always trying to do, and I'm not saying it just about Sachs, I'm saying it because I think it's our job, is always to affirm the ways that we have survived in the diaspora, regardless of the fact that they've always tried to kill us, right? That's where Sachs always wants to focus, is that how did that happen? That is incredible. And what he's saying here in this particular commentary is part of how it happened is that we had a God who was available to us anywhere, unlike the Edomites and the Jebusites, right? And the Phoenicians, right? Who are gone. They're gone because not because there's anti-Edomism, but because their God was a local God and their relationship to that religious tradition was only through that land. Once you have this idea of a God of the Midbar and the people are in the Midbar, then wherever the people are, they can access Torah and they can access the covenant and they can access, right? And that's what Sachs is always trying to focus on, because he is a diasporic Jewish leader and teacher and thinker. He wants to give us hope. And that's my job too, for myself first, and then for y'all. But for myself first, like that, okay, yeah, it's tough. And yeah, here we are again in another scary time, in another, scary set of circumstances. Sure. Yeah, because guess what? That's what it is if you're not living in the land of Israel. And if you're living in the land of Israel, you've got a bunch of other fights on your hands. And you've got a bunch of other threats. I have a threat to myself as a queer person, as a woman, as a liberal Jew. There are threats to me in the land of Israel that I don't face outside the land of Israel as a rabbi. Like there's lots of things I fight in Israel that I don't fight here. So gam v'gam, also. Yeah. So there's freedoms and there are scary things wherever we are. But what we have to remember is that we are a people who has been able to access a relationship to the eternal, to that which is bigger, to each other, through each other, we might even say, with each other, in a way that ensures the possibility, if we continue to do it, of our survival, no matter where we are and what this is. And that is our obligation, I believe, especially as we come to Shavuot, especially as we come to Matan Torah. Are we ready to receive? If so, we need to make ourselves hefker kamidbar, as hefker as the wilderness. Shabbat shalom.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.